Isn't it miraculous, really? How just a few notes of luminous music can start an inspirational thought, profoundly touch you, and direct your mood. Indeed, trigger off an expansion of your vision on life. Hi, I'm Henk van Leeuwen, music promoter, and this is Melbourne. We've arrived in one of the most beautiful concert halls in the world, purposely designed for chamber music, and indeed, art music of all kind.
Hello, I'm Tony Gould. This program is about the remarkable art of improvisation, musical improvisation, creative, spontaneous, and it embraces some of the incredible talent we've got in this wonderful city of Melbourne of ours. We hope you enjoy this. It's very exciting.
Welcome to Bennett's Lane Jazz Club, another centre for the art of creative music in Melbourne, and for 20 plus years, an internationally respected place of jazz practice. A home for many music lovers and revered players. Such a beautiful song, My Funny Valentine, Richard Rogers, and beautiful playing by our dear friend Graham Lyle. And this brings me to the whole concept of the art of improvisation, which I understand has not really been too well understood throughout the decades. And once upon a time, and you can tell me, wasn't it true that classical musicians, practitioners, had to improvise, had to actually go beyond, the written score? And if so, if those musicians were not themselves, composers, how would they have been expected to go about that?
Great question, Hank. It's true. Most so-called classical musicians in 16th, 17th century and around about that time, and in fact a lot of the great composers of the 18th and 19th century were indeed great improvisers as well, Liszt being the obvious one. It's the first thing I would say about this, and it's kind of sometimes forgotten, that most people that make music on this planet improvise music. We tend to be a bit precious about Western civilization and how good we are, but most cultures, if not all cultures outside the West, are improvised music, part of society and the whole business. So in the West, we come to improvisation through the Baroque period, mainly, where harpsichord players would need to fill in the bits that aren't on the page, and to move fast forward to the improvisers of the 20th and 21st century, the jazz improvisers. They've taken that to a much higher level in terms of the spontaneity of it, where they've just got a set of chords or a melody, and they expand in every way, melodically, harmonically, rhythmically. It's pretty amazing art form, actually, and it's kept alive mostly by jazz musicians and jazz musicians that have moved on into other sort of peripheral art forms connected with improvisation, really. It's astonishing art.
When we talk about creative music, we could then mean that the development, the expansion, the personal take that a classically trained musician, say in this case, would be allowed to manifest, whereas an improvising jazz musician would thrive on the whole idea of improvising, extempore, on the spot, apart from playing the head, and then we get all the solos. And this is where there is a complete difference of emphasis.
Yeah,
yes,
a bit of a big divide, actually. It's kind of breaking down here. We also sometimes forget that all music making, if you make music, is all creative. We tend to get a bit precious on the improvisation side. You talk to any great classical player, they are bringing to life, to new life, if you like, old repertoire off the page. You just can't simply play the notes off the page. It means really nothing. You have to actually be creative there too, notwithstanding the fact that you're supposed at least to play all the notes.
Yeah, right. Of course.
But there is a creative side to the classical music.
Yeah.
It's just that there's a different mindset and a certain amount of trepidation from the classical musicians that haven't improvised in the jazz sense, that if they improvise, there might be a wrong note somewhere. Jazz musicians don't want to play wrong notes either, but it's the adventure of it and the spontaneity of it that doesn't rely on a fully printed score. Yeah. That's the excitement of of improvisation in one. You just never know. If you're good at it, the number of mistakes will disappear, hopefully completely, but not always, all the time. But the better you get at it, the better you eliminate the things that you don't want to play.
Love is lovelier the second time around, just as wonderful with both feet on the ground. It's that second time you hear your love song sung, makes you think perhaps that love like youth is wasted on the young. Love's more comfortable the second time you fall, like a friendly home the second time you call. Who can say what led us to this miracle we have found? There are those who bet love comes but once, and yet I'm so glad we met the second time around. Love's more comfortable the second time you fall, like a friendly home the second time you call. Who can say what led us to this miracle we have found? There are those who bet love comes but once, and yet I'm so glad we met the second time around.
There's a wonderful mystery about music and music making, and I hope no one will ever find the answer completely to it. I'm pretty sure they won't, but you can seek and you shall find, but you won't find the mystery to complete mystery to music making. It's too obscure, and I think it should stay that way. With regards to people you mentioned, Coltrane and Miles and Jarrett, people like that, I think the fundamental aspect about these people, and I include Bill Evans in this if we're talking about the jazz idiom, is that they play for themselves first. That sounds incredibly selfish, but in fact it's not. Evans said the most beautiful thing. He said very many beautiful things about music, but first he said it's about truth and beauty. But also he was asked once, what do you do when you play in front of an audience? He said, well, the first thing I do is I have to please myself first.
Yeah.
Call it selfishness. It's not really.
Yeah.
He said, I would like to play something that if I was in the audience, it would make me happy. And I think that's sort of the embracing of people who listen to you when you play. It's not an act, it's not a show, it's come on the journey. I think you've used that term before somewhere when we've had conversations. It's a journey, so come on the journey. We don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's a very beautiful thing to do, and it's also a beautiful thing to witness.
Yeah, sure. Because, if music in all its forms and all its genres is a universal language, of communication that we want to reach people with, apart from ourselves in the first place, is it therefore, and it's the same as classical music, depending on which audience to play for somewhere in a geographical and cultural context, the perception that the audience hopefully will get from this music, could that vary between cultures of understanding?
Absolutely. If you're talking about Western and then non-Western culture, there's a very great divide between the musics of various cultures, and the further you get away from the West, the more obscure it becomes to us. For example, in Iran or Iraq, or if we don't know the music well, we can form our own aesthetic about it. We can enjoy it, or we can not enjoy it. For example, Chinese music is very difficult to listen to.
Yeah.
For most Westerners, one should never make the judgment about based on solely I don't like it. That's really dumb. As a reasonably educated person, so it's a question of familiarity, and in jazz music, familiarity comes in the moment. In fact, we all love Mozart and Beethoven, and we go and we've got certain expectations about
Indeed.
what we want to hear,
Yeah.
and we might get hopefully various different interpretations in jazz music. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's a minority art form, and will stay that way. And I don't object to that, frankly. Is that it's a hard music to grasp if you don't saturate yourself in it, because you start and it's not going to be the same as last night or the night before. It's going to be different. So that's incredibly exciting, but it can be disconcerting for people to come and listen to it and they haven't got anything really to hang on to unless they know the language. That's the difficult part of promoting the whole notion of jazz and, in fact, improvisation in the moment music making.
Yeah. It's often referred to in this music, in this improvised music, as having an attitude. The attitude of the composer, practicing musician, the soloist, to the music. That apart from being a wonderfully skillful, talented player, the attitude with which the player comes into the music. And I'm asking you to comment because you can, discern an American attitude, a more recent American attitude to music.
Yes,
But then you have as a opposite, say a Nordic or a European chamber style music attitude. Some people talk a lot about what they are about to play, or others are rather more introvert, like perhaps the Finns or the Norwegians, But in Australia, and I think you've written about this Larrikinism attitude, okay, let's make music and be very spontaneous about it. Can you say something about that?
I can. I'm glad you asked, Hank. Yes, I have I have not fixed views about, but very strong views about attitudes of different musicians who play music. This is generalisation. You can't pin it down to particular people, but generally speaking, the Northern European musicians, to my ears and to my eyes as well, have a completely different attitude to the American counterparts who play the traditional modern jazz, if I could put it that way.
Yeah.
I think it's partly to do with the Americans, and this is not meant necessarily to criticism, think they own the music.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It was created in North America and South American parts. No one owns anybody's music as far as I can see. That's one thing. That's a very sort of nationalistic American thing, which is perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
Northern European musicians, and I'll get to Australian musicians, because it's my favourite bunch of people. Northern European musicians have a much less extrovert way of playing, generally speaking. Much less extrovert way of talking about their music.
Yeah.
Which I think is connected with the culture. Maybe it's the weather in Northern Europe.
Sure.
It's something to do with everything, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
And then Australian musicians, you mentioned the word larrikinism. Well, if you can read any book on Australian culture you like, and there are hundreds of them now, they will mention that word somewhere.
Yeah.
From Robert Hughes to Blaney and
Historically,
anybody you want to talk about. So is it there? Well, yes, I think it is. It can be mistaken for I don't care about music, I don't care about it, it's not that important. I think that's a mistake to think like that. I think it's an attitude that you mentioned before, that that when you make music, improvised music especially, you must get into it in a very deep way, and you can't afford to be too precious about anything else except the music.
Right.
So the other side to larrikinism, that's what I mean by larrikinism. It's getting deep into the music, but it's also maintaining your own integrity, but also not getting too precious about music making. And I learned that from a very great Australian musician who I played with for many years, John Sangster, and Graham Lyle. You will never know Graham Lyle is one of the greatest saxophone players in the world, because he doesn't spout it, he plays.
He's right.
When it comes to Australians, I think the larrikinism can often be confused with the wonderful sense of humour that Australians have. That's, I think, in many ways, not totally, but unique to Australia. I think it's to do with the climate and the space and all that sort of stuff that we could talk about for days. But when you play with Australian musicians, there are exceptions, of course. There's this wonderful camaraderie, and there's rarely a case where you would be told what to do. It's based more, Australian musicians are based there playing more on I trust you.
Yeah.
You do what you have to,
Yeah.
and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Tony, I want to ask you about some of the repertoire, you know. You've chosen Schindler's List as a wonderful film theme, and of course it has cello in it. I want you to say something about that. Also about your own compositions. Another one of yours, First Day of Spring, and perhaps you could say something about Graham Lyle, and also about a great tenorist in Melbourne, Robert Burke.
I'll try and do that as succinctly as I can.
Right.
First of all, repertoire is has been very much diversified over the last, say, 10 or 20 years, beyond what we call the jazz repertoire. There's old jazz repertoire and new jazz repertoire. The old is the Tin Pan Alley Broadway music. New repertoire I call from Chick Corea and Hancock and those people. And so in Australia in particular, and in Europe too, musicians are spreading their wings even further beyond the so-called jazz repertoire into all sorts of things, like Schindler's List is a film score by John Williams, and it's very beautiful. So what musicians do, I think, is look for, forget about the genres and the idioms. The labels are becoming more and more difficult to be precise about. You choose the music that you love as much as you think other people will love it as well. So Schindler's List is in there because I think Williams is he's actually a wonderful film composer, but also a wonderful classical composer too, if you listen to his classical works. That's there, and it suits the cello with Imogen Mannins magnificently, and it's a lovely crossover between so-called jazz and improvisation with the instrument as well as the repertoire. So the divide's breaking down, the great schism between jazz and classical is breaking down from a repertoire point of view and from a musician point of view. And what was the third piece, Hank? A piece by...
The First Day of Spring.
The First Day of Spring.
Robert Burke.
That's an original piece, and Rob Burke, tenor saxophone, plays that. Rob's quite wonderful musician. But the music is composed around, we go back to classical influence too. It's not around a jazz standard type of form. It's around a sort of more expansive European type melody that doesn't have strict bar lines. It's more like played in the rhythm of a 19th century romantic symphony, if you like, where the beat is obscured, which I love, rather than being hit over the head with it all the time. And that's the essence to my current sort of playing at the moment and writing. We shall see in the future.
Great, man. I certainly am enjoying this whole story deeply so far, and I'm sure that people out there taking the interest are equally into it.
Hope so, Hank.
I'm coming to the point where I'm going to ask you the intergenerational experience, the way that you, as a composer, as a great practitioner of music, pianist, connect and interconnect with players, and the importance of how you actually come to playing music and the connection you make with institutions and indeed, the talented younger players. And Sam Evans, the tabla player in our film here, bringing the Indian influence. Please tell me.
Sam's a PhD student at Monash University, where I am currently positioned in the improvisation jazz department. He's pretty spectacular. He spent 10 years in Calcutta. He's a master tabla player. And that's another example, Henk, of musicians that are improvising, looking outside their own Western culture, kind of a non-elitist approach. We've got so much to learn about rhythm, for example, from Indian music and other things from African music and various other parts of the world. The Sam has brings something very special to improvised music, the Indian perspective, if you like. At the moment he's creating compositions where tabla is not just playing the rhythmic role, but he's composing, as we speak, a set of works that embrace the tabla into the harmony of music. This hasn't been done before. Tabla's been around the Western culture for 100 years. Sam's doing something special with it.
Okay.
The intergenerational thing, I will tell you that institutions are sometimes denigrated because they're seen as factories. Music institutions in Australia are not factories. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Factories in the sense we churn out the same sort of thing all the time. That's no way to teach anyway, in my opinion. So institution Monash in particular has got a very jazz-based program, but towards the end of the period of undergraduate and then into postgraduate, students are encouraged to write their own music and look around their own, at least I do this, look around your own environment, your own climate, your own geography for inspiration. Don't always look to New York every time you play jazz music.
Sure.
And that goes for females and males. A lot of females want to sing like Ella Fitzgerald. I often say, I'm sorry, but that's too late. Learn from them, but don't live in that. So from my perspective, the intergenerational aspect of institutions it's got two wonderful aspects to it. First of all, from my life, it keeps me young. I hang out with the young musicians. I play with them as much as I can. That's life enriching for me. But the other great aspect of institutionalised teaching is that there develops a collegiality and a camaraderie amongst the students, not necessarily to do with music, but more to do with human existence and human connection. Yeah. That is one of the great values of of networking, of institutionalised teaching, the social networking, and you make friends for life, musical and other. People, need to remember it's not just learning which scale goes over which damn chord. I don't care as much about that as just move in the circle that where you're inspired.
And setting you up for the fabric of life.
The rest of your life, absolutely.
It's all part of communicating at different levels through music.
Absolutely. It's my turn to ask you a question.
Yeah, man.
You've been here, 40 years, did you
50
say?
years.
50 years.
Exactly.
And you're European born, so you still have that strong connection with Europe. You've brought some wonderful musicians from all over the world, but mainly from Northern Europe, would that be fair to say? Both classical and improvising musicians. What keeps you in Melbourne? What's so special about Melbourne?
Well, it's the centre of my world in terms of creativity, inspirationally, the importance of being connected, organically with music, and of course there's the passion, the personal passion, and there is the personal take on what you do. I'm just one guy who wants to bring and add to the same experiences, musical, improvised and classical experiences, with selective artists of my choice, and they include Northern Europeans and Australians. And Melbourne really does have this fantastic experience, which a lot of people, aren't fully quite aware of. The musicians are, most of them are. The people who organize festivals and venues are, and sometimes I think that the people, in authority, so to speak, as much as I respect them and I appreciate their inputs, are sometimes a touch behind in terms of what the enormously creative activity in the city is capable of delivering, to the creative economy which we all can socially, culturally, but also economically, I must say, benefit from. That's why I'm so pleased that you and I are talking the same language, are on the same page, Tony. Thank you very much indeed.
We are. And Melbourne's very special for any number of reasons, but artistically, always big debates about Sydney and Melbourne, all that sort of stuff. We can have another discussion about that another time, but Melbourne's always struck me, although I'm biased, I come from here, as the most creative city artistically in Australia. Not to say that there's not other great creative things going, but all manner of things, and especially music, it seems to me. And now we've got the Melbourne Recital Hall with a salon, unbelievable sort of purpose-built venue, one of the best in the world.
Absolutely.
Easily. And we've got some jazz clubs and things, and it's a very healthy environment. And with the institutions, with the output of institutions, this beautiful music that we call improvisation is very much alive and well.
Talking about listening, of course, I'm not a practitioner, regretfully, I'm not a musician, but I listen, and it is everything to me to listen and perceive and absorb the music that is in front of me and hearing it. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective as a practitioner, musician, the importance of listening to your fellow musicians in the moment, depending on where you are, when you are, but also sensing your audience. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the word listen is of the utmost importance for me when you're learning about music and when you're listening to it, obviously. And there are literally thousands of textbooks on how to play and, all that sort of stuff that comes from another part of the world, mostly. They're okay, they're good learning tools. But in the end, I think it really is about listening to your fellow human beings. not just music, Hank, just listening to people say. I mean,
Yeah.
every time we open our mouths, unless we're scripted, which we aren't, thankfully,
Yeah.
during the day, we're improvising all the time.
Exactly.
And we actually, if we're halfway decent, we'll be listening to what other people are saying.
Yeah.
I think the analogy is very strong to music. Just listen to it, and this includes the punctuation in the English language. You stop and you start when you think it's appropriate. That's the same in music too. There's a very strong correlation between the language and different cultures, language of different cultures, and the way music is made in different cultures. So I think the bottom line for me is, by all means, learn in any way you can. But remember, the bottom line for me is that music is first and foremost about sound.
Yeah.
It's about listening. And in fact, you are a musician. You are happening to be a listening musician,
Yeah.
as distinct from one that actually does it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a thin line between those
Sure.
two, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I do it and you listen, but I listen
Yeah.
too, and you sort of do it in your head.
Is that also to do with to know when to play and perhaps not to play? It's the notes that you don't play.
It's the best question.
You know?
Yes,
Bill Evans
and
does that.
it's very hard for some people to stop and play, and that raises another issue which we'll discuss at another time about what are you doing when you're improvising? Are you composing? Are you serious, or are you just mucking about? If you're mucking about, you're likely to play more notes than you need to.
Sure.
And I think, again, it's about just listen to what you're doing and listen to what other people are doing and pick up on what's, for me, as Bill Evans said, I'll borrow from him again, truth and beauty.